What's up, students? My name is Eric. I'm here with my good friend Colin.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us tonight. We're going to do something a little bit different tonight. We're going to kind of reflect over the past few weeks. I believe when life throws us a curveball, when things are different in our life, it gives us a good opportunity to learn from it and to grow from it. And so that's what we're going to hopefully do tonight. I don't know about you, Colin, but I really feel like the last few weeks have been like a big detour in my life.
That's
How
perfect.
about you?
Yeah, no, that's the perfect way
Yeah.
to describe it.
Yeah, and so I know I've learned a lot through this, and you've told me about some things that you've learned, and so we're just going to talk about those, and we hope that you will be reflecting on kind of what you've learned as well. So, Colin, what would you say are the one or two kind of biggest things that you've learned through this time?
So I think for me, the biggest thing is when you get into this detour kind of season, you really start realizing all the routines, all the disciplines, all the strengths you were building before it happened get put to the test.
Yeah.
You really, when you walk into this, you kind of realize, hey, I'm not holding this up as well as I thought I
Right.
was. Things start slipping. You give yourself room to let go of things that maybe you were valuing a little bit more beforehand.
Sure.
And I think the other thing when you get into the season, when you're forced to be isolated a lot more and by yourself a lot more, it allows for a lot more self-reflection. Then you end up seeing things that are maybe worse, maybe
Yeah.
bad habits you never realized before,
Right.
think more negative aspects that you weren't used to. So I think for me, the biggest struggle has been kind of dealing with that, figuring out how to manage it, and also how to figure out not to make it overly overwhelming.
Yeah. That's good. For me, I kind of, as this thing began to unfold, the world around us was falling apart. And for me personally, something that was hard for me is something that I've known my whole life. I grew up in church. My dad's a pastor, and so to see something that was so important in my life just begin to fall apart and be done in a different way was very challenging for me. To think about doing church in such a different way. So that was the first thing that kind of hit me. But then along with that, God just began to whisper, hey, I'm in control. I got this. And so I began to feel like there was an overwhelming sense of peace through this situation. And so that was kind of another lesson that I've been walking through with this.
That's awesome.
And so those are just a couple of the things that we've learned. I know, like I said, you've learned some things. Tonight, we really wanted to kind of set up this discussion by looking at a time in Jesus' own life where he encountered a detour. Tell us about that detour.
So we're going to be looking at this detour from the very first gospel in the New Testament, the Gospel of Matthew. We have 4 gospels in the New Testament. They're basically just the story of Jesus and his ministry.
Yeah.
And so here, what's actually happening is Jesus just got baptized.
Yeah.
And so here in Matthew 3:16 through verse 17 it says, after his baptism, as Jesus came up out of the water, the heavens were opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and settling on him. And a voice from heaven said, this is my dearly loved Son, who brings me great joy. So this is Jesus getting baptized. This is all the setup. This is right before he's going to go into his ministry.
Right.
This is right before he's going to get put on a bit of a detour of his own.
Yeah, so Jesus is baptized. That's the end of chapter 3 in Matthew. And then immediately, chapter 4, verse 1, it says this, then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted there by the devil. For 40 days and 40 nights he fasted and became very hungry. So immediately after he was baptized, he was whisked away into the wilderness for 40 days and for 40 nights. And it says that he was tempted by the devil, by Satan. We'll save that for another day. It's some great stuff that we can learn from that. But the thing I want you to see right here is that as Jesus was heading in one direction, a detour occurred. And it wasn't just a small detour. This was 40 days of something that was different for him. He was, as Colin said, he was beginning his earthly ministry. It was about to get going. He was about to start telling people exactly why he came. And then he was sent into the wilderness. Have you felt like you've been in the wilderness over these last few times?
Definitely have felt like I've been in
I
the
have for sure
wilderness.
as well. So what can we learn from Jesus as he encountered a detour in his life? I think there are some things that we can take away from this. The first thing that I see is that detours don't mean danger. Detours don't always mean danger. Now, there are some times in our lives where we encounter things that are out of our control that are difficult and they're awful. But detours don't always have to mean danger. Now, I want you to understand that when we encounter detours, there are some times that God is preparing us for other things. He's preparing us for what's next. And that's exactly what was happening in the life of Jesus. God was preparing him for what's next. Now, no one thought that at the beginning of 2020, that by springtime we would be quarantined in our house, that there would be no sports, that there would be no graduations, that we wouldn't be going to camp this summer. None of us thought that. And we can look at this situation as a time that was filled with things that we didn't get to do. There were things that we didn't get to do, and there were filled with time that was just frustrated and bored. Yeah. Or we could look at this time as an opportunity to learn from it. And we could look at this time as God preparing us for what's next. So I think the first thing that we can learn from Jesus' detour is that detours don't mean danger.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. And kind of the picture that puts in my mind is, I don't know if you've ever driven home before, you're trying to go home at night or after work or after a long day, and all of a sudden there's a detour on your way home. Maybe it adds an extra 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, and it can be so frustrating.
So frustrating, yeah.
But the first thing from that is, in terms of roads, when there's a detour, a lot of times that's for protection. The other way isn't going to work out, even if it's worked out every other time before. And what that kind of leads me to think about is, when I am driving on a detour, when I'm going home a different way, it requires focus. Detours require focus.
Yeah, that's good.
You can't have your focus be split. You can't mindlessly drive like a lot of us do in our routine.
Right.
You know, you're arguing in your head, you're getting mad at other drivers, you're jamming out to music, you're eating food, you're doing whatever. You can't do that on a detour because you got to pay attention.
That's right.
You know?
That's good.
And so one of my favorite things that I've heard in this season is that in a crises reveal who you are, what you believe, and what you value.
That's good.
And I think that's so key, because for me, I want to be known as a Christian. I want to be known as somebody who loves people, who loves God. I want my values to be that I value Jesus Christ, that those are the things I value, and I value the love from God, and I believe in that. And so when you get into this season, if your focus is split, sometimes who you are, what you believe, what you value looks different from moment to moment.
Right.
And so I think the best thing we can do is we can ask ourselves in this season, the best question is, what's my focus? When I'm on a detour and it requires me to focus, what is my focus, and what do I need to eliminate? And what it makes me think of is one of the letters in the New Testament written by Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament, to the church in Thessalonica. And in 1 Thessalonians 4, he writes that our focus should be living to please God. And I think when we make God our focus and pleasing God our focus, then who we are, what we believe, and what we value becomes what we want it to become. We want it to become about God and about loving others.
And we even see that in the story of Jesus. He was taken off into the wilderness, and what did he do? He spent his time in prayer and fasting. And so his focus was right on God. And so I think that is such an important point, that when we encounter a detour, where's our focus? And so tonight, as you think about these last 10 weeks, this crazy last 10 weeks, remember that detours don't always mean danger, and detours require focus. So for you, what have you learned during this time? What changes do you need to make? What friends maybe that you need to let go of? What is God doing in your life that you need to kind of change or
reevaluate
adjust?
your focus.
Yeah, that's right. And so let's remember that in these times that God is preparing us for what's next. I want to close tonight with one more passage. It's from Paul again. It's in the book of Ephesians. And this is so important for this conversation. It says this, Ephesians 5:15, "Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of time."
That's so good.
Every bit of time that God has given us, every moment of time, whether it's in quarantine, whether it's our normal life, it's special, it's important. So take that time and use it wisely and learn from it, because God is preparing us for what's next. We really hope that you have a great discussion tonight, reflecting on all that God's done over these last few weeks. We hope to see you real soon.